They're here to teach, they're here to heal, and or they're here as just an animal companion. It's the people who actually take it as a lesson and an opportunity to figure out how they can help the animal, but inadvertently help themselves, or vice versa, help themselves to help the animal.
If you're treating your dog too much like a person, then you're ignoring the dog part of them, which is obviously important. Where is the point where it gets to be too much, where we're treating our dogs or our pets too much like human beings?
It's all about the human-animal connection. That's why we have them. That's why we have that bond, and that's why animals have personality, is so we have something to connect to on a very basic level. But it goes so much deeper. Meg, Modern Day Dolittle, Animal Communicator, at your service.
Okay, you ready? In 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Toronto Dogcast, the podcast for dog lovers and everything to do with dogs. Very excited today, super excited, because here with me today is Meg, Toronto's own Modern Day Dolittle, and we're going to be talking about a dog's purpose. And I'm not talking about the film, and if we have time, we're going to talk about dogs' personalities and the differences between some dogs' personalities and how we view those personalities. So let's get right into it. So a dog's purpose, very big, very broad topic, very philosophical. But Meg is probably one of the best people to talk about dog's purpose because she can hear. She's an animal communicator, so she's spoken to a lot of dogs, or the dogs have spoken to you along with a lot of other animals.
Other animals, yeah. Yeah, well, thanks for having me back.
High five?
Ah!
Boom!
Yeah, just don't hit me for He's got a strong fiber.
Thunk.
Yeah. So, yeah, thank you first and foremost. Second of all, really cool topic, because we were kind of going back and forth about what should we talk about, like what's going to be the topic matter. And you got lots of people inquiring with different
questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, just so for anybody who doesn't know, I post on Instagram before every podcast, and people can submit their questions and topics and things like that so that we can include them in the podcast, and we'll do our very, very best to answer them.
Yeah.
So we got a lot of cool stuff. So in terms of a dog's purpose, again, very broad topic, but off the top of your head, what would you say a dog's purpose is?
A dog, I can actually lump a dog into most any animal's purpose. So let's go broad strokes for a second, then we can come
high level.
Yeah, high level, then go into the weeds. Animals come to have a life on this earthly plane for one of 3 reasons: to heal. Okay, now that's it. That could be domestic and they can be wild. So they can be healing the land that they roam on, say in Africa. The elephants do that in Africa. Or they can come and heal their individual people that are their owners, caretakers, guardians, things of that nature. Another purpose could be to teach lessons, to help guide you on your path, things like that. And another one is just to be a companion, an animal companion. Okay.
Sure.
Now, of those 3, animals can be 1 of 3, 2 of 3, 3 for 3, right? So usually it kind of falls into those broad strokes. So that's animals, but applying it to dogs, yeah, it's very much the same.
I've heard many, many stories from almost every single dog owner in terms of a time in their life when they were experiencing some sort of emotional difficulty, possibly some, struggles, depression,
mental health,
anything like that,
for sure.
or an event, divorce, a death in the family, something where their emotions are really strained. And their dogs were, if they weren't there, they would have really struggled.
Absolutely, yeah. So you bring up something really interesting about why animals come into our life at a certain time, for a certain period of time. They see us through some of the most biggest struggles, biggest heartaches, and obstacles and endeavors that we've ever had to experience in our life to date. And we always have to remember, dogs have a limited time frame being with us, right? We live for, if we're so lucky, we live for a long lifetime, and animals come and go in much shorter spans. So if you can think back, dog lovers, you've had multiple dogs, maybe some from childhood. If you think back to the lessons or the healing they helped provide you during certain times in your life and how profound that was, it makes you appreciate them a little bit more. It also makes you think a little bit deeper into the understanding of it's not choice or coincidence or a fluke how you had an animal come into your life. And there's also this notion of why they leave and when they leave, and they leave on their own accord. So they're kind of done that step or that journey with you, and they've done that lessons, and they get to ascend, they get to graduate and move on to the other side. I mean, that's me speaking more spiritually on topic, for sure. But yeah.
If you're a dog lover, I think a lot of people have had a dog early on in their life. So for me, for example, I've always had dogs my whole life. There's pictures of me as a baby using my dog as a pillow. Aww. And the dog wouldn't move. And it was just so comforting. And, you know, when you're young and, you know, your dog is like your best friend too. Yeah. Because it's very difficult to fit in. Yeah. You know, there's a lot of, you know, kids are mean. That's a very common thing.
It's your companion. It's your best friend. It's no fleet calling it man's best friend, right? Like, that's...
human's best friend. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
When you have a dog throughout your life, it becomes part of who you are, I think. And their purpose, I think, evolves throughout your life as well. So it might start out as a playmate, right? So when you're, you know, a child, awesome. You know, I have a dog that I can play with, that I can run around with, that I can enjoy. And then later on in life, you know, as you grow and mature, dog can become a different type of part of your life, companion. Yeah. And that friendship develops and grows. And obviously, you know, when you become more mature, like myself, I'm an old man, right? A dog becomes, you know, a part of your family. Right? Yeah. So I don't have my own family, you know, I don't have children or a wife or anything like that. So my dogs are my family as well, right? So I don't want to say my dogs are my kids because I never say that kind of thing, but they're definitely my family. Like
they're the only family that we get to choose.
Exactly.
Sorry, fam. It's a joke. No, but I want to mention something. It's like it's not always roses. When I was growing up, I was young when this happened, but I put my hand in my dog's food bowl and it bit me.
Oh.
Because, when I was little, I put my hand in my dog's food bowl. I'm talking about my journey in hindsight's 2020 and the experiences I've had with animals that didn't actually change the course of how I interacted with animals in a bad way, but actually helped them in a more positive. So I feel like I grew an even closer bond with my dog as a result of that. Go figure, because most people would be entirely, even a little kid looking at a dog the wrong way can scare them for life. Totally. I was actually bit by my own dog, okay? You know, we kept the dog, you know, thankfully my parents decided, like, you know, it's kind of abnormal, maybe it was her fault, no. It was really interesting, and then I think about these other experiences I've had with animals, and sometimes animals cause you a lot of strife and a lot of frustration and a lot of disappointment in ways, guilt or shame. Like, they bring up all kinds of negative emotions, but for a reason. So it's like honoring the animal for what they're there to teach you, because it's not always easy. Sometimes they bring up stuff so that it's like a mirror back at you that you can say, like, because this is the work that I do as an animal communicator, is people come to me and say, my animals has some behavioral issues. And there's the humanness, the ego, as an animal behavioralist you work with, and there's the logical and the rational way of how to curb that behavior or tailor it and modify it so you can get the positive reaction or positive behavior out of them. Now, when I do an animal reading, sometimes we do a switcheroo, and I'm not reading the animal anymore, but I'm actually focused more on their owner, because the owner is actually getting alarm bells going off from the animal, thankfully from the animal, that they need to course correct something in their life. And the animal is just showing it to call attention to it. It's like a call to action. Now, why does that happen? Because we love our animals so much that we are willing to actually invest time and effort in ourselves to course correct for them.
Totally.
It's what do you call that? Is that just like the biggest...
Well, I
turn
tell,
around and like...
Totally. But
Yeah.
I mean, I tell people a lot that dogs are like a mirror. They reflect
energy,
the
behaviors,
person that they're with.
everything. Yeah.
Right? So sometimes what a dog can help you do is to become more self-aware.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times our subconscious is working. We don't really know what's going on with ourselves.
Yeah.
But when we see, let's say, for example, your dog is nervous or anxious or fearful, that's very noticeable, right? Because you can see that, or other people can see it from far away. As human beings, and this is just my opinion, we're very good at masking our emotions, right? So we could put on a brave face, right?
Yeah.
Stiff upper lip, right? And kind of be like, oh, you know what? I'm kind of down today, but I'm just going to put on a brave front because I don't want other people to know that I'm down.
Yeah.
Whereas, like,
you
your
can't hide
dog's,
from them. No.
Dog's just going to know it, right? You can't fool them. You can't trick them. They just understand, right? So sometimes if you're sitting there going, okay, well, my dog is nervous, my dog is anxious, my dog is fearful, sometimes it's like a wake-up call for people to understand, oh, I'm nervous, I'm anxious, I'm fearful. And then they can do something about it. Yeah. If they're of the mindset of, okay, I'm not enjoying this, and I definitely don't want to project it onto my dog. Like, I don't want my dog to pick up on it. Yeah. So I'm going to do something to address my nervousness. It's like a self-help.
Yeah, they call you to self-help.
Yeah, but without it, they would have just gone through their life just kind of accepting it because there wasn't, like, you know, that mirror to show them that it was actually going on.
It's something, they're creatures that literally are your heart, so to speak. So something you love so much that you've invested so much like a child. I've invested so much child in my time. Time in my child. Yeah, it's a cyclical fact. So I see that all the time where the animal's nervous, but they're actually picking up on your nerves. And then their job, their purpose, is to take away any energy or negative feelings that don't serve you or your highest purpose. Right. So then they take it from you, but then you see it manifesting more in them, which actually triggers more in you. So then you have this vicious cycle of anxiety. Yes. Now that's just one example of a negative emotion. It can be all kinds of things. It can be fear. It could be whatever. But the other thing is that sometimes it's not as direct and it's not as obvious a mirror, okay? It's not as a clear reflection because, for example, your anxiety and another animal's anxiety might not be paralleling. Like, I've seen animals that are chewing their paws and they're chewing like hot spots on their body. Yeah. Now, how do you rationalize that behavior in a human? Like, that does, like, what would you say? But through the telepathic reading is we pick up that they're having a hard time sharing their voice, standing up for themselves, showing leadership in their own lives, and loving themselves. Well, how did you get that out of hot spots? Like, it's a little bit of an indirect correlation sometimes. Yes. So that's how deep we can go into reading. But some people are surprised to come for reading because they want to just talk about the dog. Well, sorry, like I always say, we never know where this is going to go. And the best case readings are they help you and the animal.
We got a question about the dog's purpose when it comes to spiritual versus practical. And I think this is a good pairing because I'm a very practical type of individual when it comes to dogs, although I do dabble in the spiritual, if you will. But you're very much on the spiritual side as well. So, you know, I think we touched on the emotional side, but, you know, in terms of answering this question from the Instagrams, what would you say is the difference between their spiritual purpose and the practical purpose?
I think it's kind of synthesizing what we already talked about. I think they parallel. I think it's like kind of it's just which way you slice it. Like, how would you describe it based on what we've just chatted about?
What I would consider spiritual purpose would be things to do with somebody's emotional state. Okay. So if a dog's purpose is more, you know, in tune to what you need emotionally. So let's say you need some emotional support because there was a death in the family, or maybe you had another dog that passed, and the dog provides emotional support for you to get through that difficult time. And there's been many stories I've heard about that. And then you have a practical purpose of, you know, things like companionship and having a playmate and personal protection and confidence. You know, I think those are more practical, you know, things. Like, even to the point of, I can say hand on heart that without dogs in my life, I wouldn't be as fit. I'm not saying I'm fit because I have a man baby. Okay? I'm in my third trimester.
I think your
of my
knee's in the way. Why don't you sit up and do that?
You know, in terms of a practical purpose, having dogs in your life has the potential to keep you healthier and to extend your life. Because I wouldn't be encouraged to walk like 3 kilometers a day on my own.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a difference between practical and spiritual, because at the end of the day, if you're saying, like, I'm the spiritual point of view, is like what I said at the outset, they're here to teach, they're here to heal, and or they're here as just an animal companion. So that's what I believe. I don't believe you can go deep into the reasons why you're healing and the reasons why they're teaching and the reason why they're here as an animal companion, but that's just more context to the whole nuance of each individual relationship between an animal and a human.
The thing about life, and when we're talking about a dog's purpose and stuff like that, it's just, and we touched on this earlier off camera, is that there's so much negativity. And it creeps into your life, and it creeps into your mind. And sometimes you're in a funk, right? And you don't know why. And you don't know, there's nothing that you can pinpoint that you're like, oh, this happened, that's why I'm miserable today. Sometimes it's just like, you wake up and you're just like, I'm just miserable. I'm just coughing. If you're looking at a dog's purpose and you're trying to figure out, okay, well, it's so easy to become negative, and we don't do it on purpose, and we don't obviously want it coming into our lives, but sometimes we find ourselves in that place, whether it's because of something that's going on in our lives or other external factors, or maybe we just having a down day. I think a dog can really help lift those spirits and maybe even help you to realize that I'm down or that I'm feeling negative. Because when you look at a dog, they represent like this purity of joy and of love.
We're talking best case scenario. Some people have dogs that are meant to create challenge in their life. The dog that won't get potty trained, the one that, you know, eats your shoes every other day, things like that.
Of course.
But you have to, like, the thing is people get rid of animals and they get rid of dogs just as quickly as they get them when they're not perfect. It's the people who actually take it as a lesson and an opportunity to figure out how they can help the animal, but inadvertently help themselves, or vice versa, help themselves to help the animal.
So let's get into a dog's personality. We did get a question from Amanda Bunting about picking a dog from a shelter and how much weight you should put into their personality clicking with your personality.
So there's this sense of faith in trusting how things happen when they're supposed to happen. Like and you know, cut to the chase here, is that if you don't feel like you connect with an animal, then it's just not the right time. And we discussed this earlier, is that it's a lot about waiting. There's a lot of waiting for the right animal, and literally they'll come to you. Like they will find you, come hell or high water. If you're intended to have your lifetime together, then there's also a lot that can happen in between. You can end up babysitting some dogs.
Sure.
You can you have a friend that's got a dog that you really like, things like that. So it can be all sorts of things, but there's to create that added pressure of having to click with an animal, I would say is probably not the right mindset to go into it in the first place, in presuming that needs to happen. If it doesn't happen, I'd just say today's not the day, or this week's not the week, or this year's not the year, and just give it time, because the last thing you want to do is feel like you pushed it into a situation that wasn't quite ready for either of you. Because I do believe in divine timing. I do believe they come when they're ready.
a dog's personality varies, right?
Absolutely.
So they could be under stress.
Yeah.
They could be lacking certain stimulation or walks or whatever. So when you're picking a dog up from a shelter, yes, personality has a lot to do with it, but I wouldn't place it at the top priority.
Yeah, too heavy on that.
I would go more in terms of lifestyle, like understanding your lifestyle. And I mentioned this before to people who are trying to choose a dog, whether it be from a shelter or from a breeder or even from the exact same litter of dogs. You're going to have certain dogs that are going to be a lot more active. You're going to have certain dogs that are going to be a lot more chill. So picking a dog based on your lifestyle, your family's lifestyle, the household's lifestyle is probably going to bode better than just saying, I want a dog with this very specific personality. So, in an ideal world, you would have all those things checked off and the dog's personality would meld really well with yours. But the reality is, lifestyle is probably a better criteria to go off of rather than strictly
like humans. Dogs have a variety of personalities.
For sure.
So when I work with an animal, sometimes they're coming across as being really cheeky. Sometimes they're like super wise. Sometimes they're like bullshitters and they like elaborate stories. And the owner's like, I was there. It didn't happen like that.
Right.
So just like human beings, there's some masks, right? There's also the higher aspects of the animals that I can kind of tap into where I can figure out what is in the best interest for them.
Sure.
Right? Versus what they're telling me. Because it's like, oh, we're talking about treats. Okay, yeah, like let's talk more about treats or let's talk about food. Great, I want more of this or I want more of that. Like, okay, but what will be best for your health because you're an overweight dog, right? So you're seeing lots of personality come through.
For sure.
But to your point about going to a shelter is, of course, you have to do your due diligence of like, what would suit my family? What would suit my lifestyle? What would suit if I've got allergies, I need a hyperallergenic or can I have one that sheds a little bit or a lot? And sometimes love overrides and you end up having allergies, but you deal with it because you are fallen in love with an animal. And that sometimes can be the lesson in and of itself is that people fall in love with animals and they've got allergies and then surprise, surprise, the allergies aren't that bad. It's like the lesson is to bend your mind a little bit and to expand your horizons so that you can actually welcome in something that you thought you couldn't have, but you actually can.
Yeah.
So
totally.
You never know.
Totally. Okay. So the last subject that we're going to touch on is the aspect of dog ownership or having a dog in your life, which is, bear with me because I'm going to try to say the proper fancy word for it. Anthropomorph. It's when you project human qualities onto a dog or any type of inanimate object. Anthropomorphize.
Oh, that sounds pretty good. Yeah, I'll buy it.
I had to practice that many times in the mirror, and it still didn't come out.
Many times.
Many times. Indeed. And I still bricked it up. So, good that I practiced that. Anyway, so there, I do it as well. I project human qualities, human emotions even.
Yes.
And I do believe dogs have emotions, but they're not the same as ours.
Well, they're sentient
or are
beings.
They?
Yeah. How do you think I can connect to them so I end up feeling how they feel? They show me how they feel through how I feel in my body.
Okay.
So if they're anxious, my heart might be fast.
Okay.
You know, I might start drooling. No, I haven't started drooling yet.
Yeah. Meg starts like doing this kind of stuff.
Is my dog anxious? I think so. Yeah, I'm getting it's anxious.
You start tilting your head in the mirror when you see certain things?
Yeah, no, that hasn't happened. But sometimes I will get like clammy paws. I mean, okay, maybe I'm taking on the animal too much.
So projecting human qualities onto a dog is a normal thing. And I think it's actually a good thing. So even plants. So I always tell people if you're going to have a plant and you give it a name, it helps you to take care of it better because it takes on a personality or human-like qualities. The danger is, I don't want to say maybe danger is a strong word, but the risk is if you do it too much.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people describe their dogs as their babies.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so it's like they're not referring to them as dogs anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They're actually looking at them as furry human beings. Then they start treating them like people, and I think it can go too far, where if you're treating your dog too much like a person, then you're ignoring the dog part of them, which is obviously important.
Mm-hmm.
So they start feeding them human food.
Mm-hmm.
I met one individual who used to feed her dog tea with sugar and cream every time she had a tea with sugar and cream, which
one lump or
caused
two.
diabetes in this particular dog. So it did. There is a risk that it gets too much. Now, dressing up your dogs and doing all that kind of stuff, you can still look at them like dogs that are dressed up.
Mm-hmm.
What I think I want your take on is, do you, like, where is the point where it gets to be too much, where we're treating our dogs or our pets too much like human beings?
Yeah, I think, well, it's interesting because I think that's a fine line, and I think it's a case-by-case situation depending on the animal you talk to. Because some of them do need the love and nurturing, and that's a way for the owner to connect with them at a deeper level that they both need, okay?
Right.
So that could be serving some of the purpose at the same time to have that deep, nurturing, really almost human-like bond, okay? And that could be a need for that particular situation. Now, there's some where they are overdoing it, and they're carrying them around, putting them in diapers, so they can't actually learn to go outside, or they are pushing them around in strollers. It's big in Japan, where they push them around in strollers, so when the dog actually gets out, hasn't built up the muscle strength, so that it bambies, so like the legs splay out from underneath it because it doesn't have the muscle strength. So there's a sense of that I understand happening. But one thing I need to mention is that animals don't really care about gender the way we care about gender. So pink is for girls, blue is for boys. It doesn't have the same effect on them, okay? So people are thinking, well, I always make sure I put the pink bow in her hair. And she's like, well, it's nice, and that's wonderful. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter all that much. So the way we've socialized isn't always the way animals have socialized. So for them, it's all even. It's all simple. It's a much more basic, unconditional love standpoint that they come from.
For sure. And I do think that the animals do enjoy being treated like humans because for the most part, I think it's a safe assumption to think that if you're treating an animal more like a human, they will get treated better, possibly, which is a really positive thing. And that could also mean better things to eat, better beds to sleep on, right?
Like your bed.
Exactly. And I think that's why people do it, is because somebody would say to me, well, I would really like a steak. So my dog would probably really like a steak. Like, Steve, the hairdresser guy, I was literally talking to him. And his girlfriend cooks. And when she cooks, she's like, well, I like salmon. I like chicken. So let's give some to the dog. So you're almost enjoying it from the dog's perspective as well, because you know how much you enjoy it. So from that standpoint, it's going to be a really good thing because the dogs are going to get treated even better.
Well, I've worked with animals where it's actually gone so far off the deep end where they get fed like the human food that it actually creates different dichotomy between the owner and animal relationship, to the point where the animal has not disrespected, but bent the relationship in a way that it's like, we are so even that it's like, I don't see it any other way. And they act out in other ways, like they don't listen, they don't behave properly. And that just stemmed from eating the same foods or getting fed at the table or things like that. So you have to be really careful about how that can branch off into the other aspects of the animal's life.
Yeah. And where it becomes a bit of a sore spot is when I have a friend of mine who feeds her dog off the table. So when she's eating, she'll, here's a bit of whatever it is that I'm eating. But then sometimes when she isn't feeding the dog whatever she's eating, the dogs are begging.
Yeah, or barking or,
or
demanding.
Demanding it, right? And then she gets annoyed with them.
Yeah.
What happens is she gets frustrated when her dogs are begging for food while she's eating or doing it to other people, because that's the other assumption that happens is dogs get used to being fed whatever they're getting fed, whatever they're eating, and then they have company over who isn't used to that, and they don't appreciate it, and then that person gets upset with their dog for doing something that they've actually created. Yeah. So I tell her, I'm like, don't send mixed messages. If you're going to feed your dog while you're eating what you're eating, then the expectation of that dog is every time you go to eat, there's a very good chance that you're going to give me some of what you're eating, and they're going to start begging for it to the point where they'll stop eating their own food. Because there's always
something better.
There's always this, ooh, that smells good. What are you cooking there, Mom?
Actually, I get that a lot. That comes up a lot of like, I can smell what you're cooking and I'd like that more.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it obviously...
I've had a taste of it before and I'd like some more, please.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, I'm not going to eat this because I really want that. And I'm determined.
I'm holding out because I know I'll get it from you.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a manipulative, that's part of personality with animals too, is they can be very manipulative.
Yes.
So we underestimate the intelligence of animals, right? Not only their feeling of emotions of happiness and sadness, but there's a sense of, they can be very conniving and manipulative. And
mischievous.
Mischievous. And all kinds of emotions, like the whole spectrum. They're not just like unconditional love. At the bottom of it, there's love and unconditional love for what they're trying to teach you. But how they go about it is like a whole spectrum of personality.
The other thing to consider is most dogs are bored, right? They stay at home all day. We go out into the world.
Yeah.
We go see our friends. We do things. We go shopping. We do this. We do that. Dogs don't have that option of just doing whatever they feel like. So they're at home all day. You're at work all day. They get bored. So these types of activities are actually stimuli. They're looking for ways to engage their mind, and it's a challenge. So what we were talking about is over-humanizing a dog to the point where it's actually detrimental to either their health or their behavior. So I think it's a fine line, and make up your own minds about where that line is. I do it as well, right? So I look at my dogs and I give them human-like qualities, but I don't go to the extent where I ignore them as dogs first, right? So I don't look at their behaviors as human behaviors first. Like, let's say, for example, a dog is displaying aggressive symptoms. I don't think first, they're just grumpy because they didn't get their morning coffee. I've had somebody actually say that to me. I'm like, okay, you need to look at this from a dog's perspective first, and then you can look at them from their personality side. Yeah,
and I think I can complement what you're saying, because when I do connect with the animal in a reading, is that the personality is the undertone. It's what we see visually. It's how we connect from our humanness or human aspects. But then there's the higher aspects of the animal that come in. And I call in the higher soul or elements of the animal so that I can figure out what is in the best interest for that animal. Because like we were saying before, well, I'm holding out for food because I know I can get something better. So I'm not going to eat my kibble. I'm going to wait.
Right.
But the higher aspects of the animal will come in and say, like, no, you need to course correct because this animal will get so obese that it will die because the fatty deposits are clogging its arteries and so on and so forth. So there's this juxtaposition between what we experience from an animal as being personality and how we connect.
Yes.
It's all about the human-animal connection. That's why we have them. That's why we have that bond. And that's why animals have personality, is so we have something to connect to on a very basic level. But it goes so much deeper. There's so much more than meets the eye in terms of personality of an animal. So the ask is, yes, acknowledge the personality. It's a great way to bond so that you know you love the animal. right? And you can experience the animal in its many shades of gray.
There's lots of subtleties, and as human beings, we experience a lot of emotions, and a lot of our personality comes through in different ways. But as people, that's part of who we are. As dogs, it's really important to understand, for example, if you say, oh, well, my dog doesn't like big dogs, right? Because that's part of their personality. That's not really correct.
You superimpose that on
that. You're projecting onto, maybe it's you don't like big dogs, and your dog is picking up on it and the rest of it. Dogs don't have a decision-making process that works like that.
Or my dog doesn't like white, fluffy dogs. It's like, wow, you've really narrowed it down to one group to discriminate against. It's like, let's just take that back a second.
So if you're looking at a dog's behavior and there's something that isn't right, don't chalk it up to their personality. Maybe look into it a little bit more to say, okay, is this something to do with them as a dog first, or is it something to do with their personality and the rest of it? Yeah. And I think that's a healthier way of approaching it. So when it comes to treating your dog like a furry human being, balance.
Yeah, it's a great way to make the bonding connection. That's the whole point, that they have personality. If they didn't, we wouldn't have them as domestic pets. Let's be honest. If animals, we wouldn't have that connection with that species or a species of animal at all if there wasn't some sort of personality or personification that came through for us to connect with. Yeah. Okay? So that's the basics of it. Now, the rest of it is what it is. Like, and you have to actually explore, and that's why people will come to me and say, like, I want to connect with my animal because I want to understand them better. I've had dogs say, I need to be given a job, I need to be given a purpose, like I need to take it back to a little bit more of the animal type thing, because that's what I want, that's what I'm here for, that's my purpose. So to play with the personality. So your dog might enjoy sleeping, but he actually really wants a little bit more work. So what do you want to do there?
I totally agree. And so I think one of the other things that it would be healthy is to acknowledge how much of it has to do with you, right?
Bingo.
And how much is it? So am I doing this because I like it? And I'm just assuming that my dog likes it? Yeah. And let's be frank, and I've said this many times, if you're giving your dog treats, the real joy is really you giving your dog the treat. It's fun for you. So really the treat is for you, more so they don't need it, right? You could give a dog some kibble, and if it's coming from your hand, they'll give you the exact same reaction as like a liver treat. At least my dogs do anyway, right? And it's nice to do those things, but you have to acknowledge, okay, this is making me feel good. I'm enjoying this. So just acknowledging that part of it and not just saying, oh, well, I'm just doing this just for them. Selflessly for my dog. Yeah,
selflessly. I think that's like a really good summarizing point, because I think this has come back a few times throughout this conversation, is the animal is the mirror. They're reflecting back. And sometimes the mirror is clear, and sometimes it's kind of foggy as to what's the lesson. And it does take someone who's, like you said, aware and open to exploring the variety of behaviors that an animal has to offer, good, bad, and otherwise, because they do come as a package. They're just like people. Like you bear a child, and they go through their terrible twos, then they're pretty good at 4, and they're back to being, a delinquent at 13. Like, it's just like, like animals are of the same notion. Does that mean they should be casted aside? So it's respecting the animal and what they bring to the table for you, because they're here for us. And I mean, I'll say it till I'm blue in the face, is they're not just here sitting around. They could have gone to Joe over there, Joe over here, or Meg over there. They're intended for you. Yeah. So get out of your own way, and back to that shelter question. If you don't connect with an animal right away, let it go. You have to trust in the process of an animal finding you. And I say that literally and figuratively, like when it's meant to be. Sometimes I've heard cats will show up at the door and we let the cat in, the cat never left. And it's like literally happens. So
totally.
So
there you go. A dog's purpose is what you make it. And everybody has a different purpose for their dog as well. So let us know in the comments what you think your dog's purpose is, or maybe what your purpose is for your dog. Okay, so if you guys want to follow us on Instagram, I'm going to put our Instagrams, I got to do it lower.
Mine is Modern Day Dolittle. Modern Day _Dolittle. 1 O in Doolittle, because everyone emails me and they spell Doolittle with 2 O's. I'm not the original Dr. Dolittle. It's just D-O-L-I-T-T.
I'll put it right here. And
Doolittle.
And yeah, so we just scratched the surface of a dog's purpose and dog personalities. There's obviously a lot more to it, but the purpose of this podcast isn't to cover everything in one go. It's just to get the discussion going. So have a think about it maybe, and maybe have a conversation with your dog about
what is their purpose.
What is their purpose, and
what would they like more of or less of, or what they want you to change, which is the hardest one to listen to. I get people like, I want to know, and then they're like, I don't want to know. You gotta be open. You gotta just lean in and see what happens. Like, you've got a mirror right in front of you, so why not look into it a little bit more? Yeah, totally. See what's up. It's all about just being more aware and conscious of that relationship and that bond. I think it's very obvious to people what they're getting from their dog, but maybe it's understanding, am I doing enough or could I do more to enhance my dog's life and their purpose as well. So that's it for today. I want to say a big, huge thank you to Toronto's own Modern Day Dolittle, Meg, for coming on the show. High five. Did you have fun? You're so welcome. I did. Thank you. It was so much fun. It was always a good time. I really appreciate you coming on. Meg's a regular. I'm a regular faffer around here. Thanks so much for watching. Till next time, if you love your dog, take them for a walk. If you love them even more, come see me. Meg, Modern Day Dolittle, Animal Communicator, at your service. That was a good one. I like that. I gotta include that in there. Peace. Yeah. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye. Thanks a lot. You're welcome. You're awesome. Oh,